Hi, and welcome today on Arkham Audio. We're going to be talking with the founding members of the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. We've got Sean Bannery and Andrew Lehman with us, and we're just going to go around and introduce ourselves and let you know who and what we are, and get into the topic.
All
Sean.
right. Well, I'm Sean Branny. My pal Andrew Lehman here, and I have been we've been at this for a very long time now. Having put together the HP Lovecraft Historical Society all the way back in the mid 1980s. So yeah, it's been it's been a couple years, and we got our start. I first learned about Lovecraft when my weirdest friend at the time handed me an anthology of short fiction tales, and he was like, "Oh, you got to read this story, The Rats in the Walls. It's super weird." And he gave it to me, and it was probably the strangest thing I had ever read at that point in my life. And then another weird pal of mine around the same time, we used to play the Dungeons and Dragons, like good 80s kids should. And then my friend Jody Ruler gave me this new game with a really hard name, Call of Cthulhu, that actually I didn't dive into immediately. It was maybe a year or so after he had given it to me that I started looking through it and realized, oh, this is the guy who wrote that weird story. Hey, this game really looks like fun. And around that time, I was doing a play at a theater company in downtown Denver, and I met this kid, Andy Lehman.
And Sean and I became friends doing that play, and he invited me to come over to his house and try out this crazy new game, Call of Cthulhu. And I had never heard of H.P. Lovecraft, but I said, okay, sounds like fun. So a bunch of us theater kids went over to Sean's house and played Call of Cthulhu. The first game we ever played was The Fungi from Yuggoth by Keith Herber, one of the original classic Call of Cthulhu adventures. And I, for one, was completely hooked. And, that campaign changed my life because it set me, it set all of us on this Lovecraft kick that we are still on. God help us.
Sorry about that.
Do y'all still play together?
We nowadays, actually, just in the last couple of years, we moved the headquarters of the HPLHS. Our last headquarters was a very industrial building. It was a old World War II rivet factory, and we moved into a new building that's. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat here. Our new building is much better situated for public events. And so once we moved to this location, we've started hosting game nights again and bringing in people. We actually haven't played together for a very long time, but we bring in, people can book slots at the table and come in and play with us. So we've been doing game nights here the last, 3 years or so.
Do y'all tend to? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, we played the traditional tabletop version of Call of Cthulhu for a few years, but pretty quickly thought, being theater kids, that we could have even more fun if we dressed up in 1920s costumes and acted it all out live. So this was, 1986, 85, before the internet existed, before we had ever heard of LARPing. So we invented, as far as we knew, we invented live action role playing and came up with our own form of playing Cthulhu in a live action way, which we called Cthulhu Lives. And once we started playing Cthulhu Lives, we didn't really go back very often to the traditional tabletop version. We wrote and ran our own live action Cthulhu adventures and did that all the way through college and into graduate school, and right up until the early mid 90s. We did a lot of our own. And then we realized, doing all those live action games, that we got more and more ambitious, and eventually we were producing games that were so elaborate that it was like we were doing all the work of making a small film, but the only people who ever got to see it were the people who were actually playing in the game. So we said we really should change our efforts and turn these into movies that more people could enjoy. It wouldn't be very much more work or money, but more people could have fun watching. So that's sort of how we evolved from gaming to LARPing to making movies and doing other sorts of stuff like that.
That's amazing. I'm actually in a live stream game right now, and we dress up and we do the whole 9 yards for a YouTube stream. And I'm playing Madame Blackstone, a a woman con artist, 1930s full drag. My wife's mad because I've raided her closet for my costume. But so on Cthulhu Lives, do you guys actually have a full rule set for people if they wanted to play that?
We sort of evolved our own system of gaming, and honestly, the LARPs we put on don't sound all that much like most of the LARPs that other folks put on. But we really kind of use the kind of game system that kids would use in playing cops and robbers when they're 6 years old. Bang, I shot you. I'm shot. Kind of thing. And we evolved some rules as more complicated situations came up over the years. And we had a bunch of sort of policies, almost more than rules, of things that keepers must not do. Essentially, that in order to protect the safety and well-being of players, to kind of put in some formal boundaries, and those served us all well over the years. But we never really had the ambition to market or really promulgate our system of live gaming outside of our own sphere. So we had lots of people who would come and play with us and go, wow, that was really fun. But we didn't do what was his name? McLaughlin? Somebody?
Yeah, Robert McLaughlin.
Yep. Yeah, did to publish and codify a set of rules and sell them to other people was never really our ambition. Although the society itself was formed really out of people who were interested in what we were doing with the live action gaming, and then later grew into a more multifaceted, really anybody who's interested in Lovecraft would find something interesting about the HP Lovecraft Historical Society. But in its earliest days, it was really very much tied to the games we were putting on.
It definitely.
We never really required, skills tests or anything. We never rolled dice or did anything like that when we were playing live. And instead, if you wanted to read the Latin manuscript, you simply had to be able to read Latin or get a dictionary or find someone who could help you translate it. We didn't have a system for that kind of stuff. If one thing we used to do, instead of like a lockpick skill, there were occasional games where the keeper wanted the investigators to be able to pick a lock, so he would just give them the key, and one player would be given sort of secret side instructions that this is your lockpick, and you can try to pick the lock with this tool, and the tool was just the key to the lock. But our gaming was very story driven, so keepers would often let players get away with things if they furthered the story,
right,
and not let them get away with things if they derailed the story.
That sounds amazing. So,
sorry, just one last thing. One of the other kind of differences in terms of how we played versus how most people played too is we would never, rent a convention hall at a hotel and say, this is the cemetery in Arkham. Instead, we would go play in a real cemetery. We played in the real British Museum. We have flown in real jet helicopters. We have been in boats in the ocean and tromped across Death Valley. So a lot of our
by the actual police several times.
Actual police. But so our games, tended to have a real tangible physical atmosphere in which the players engage, which reinforced the reality of the fictitious story we were telling. So by actually sleeping in a ghost town in the Colorado Rockies, you have a very different experience than when somebody tells you, pretend like you're sleeping in a ghost town in the Rockies, but you're really on the floor of the Sheraton,
Yeah, one of the most famous examples of that kind of verisimilitude, Sean and our friend Phil Bell, one of the other founding members, wrote a game that was set in Egypt in 1923 or thereabouts. And we played the game in the Great Sand Dunes National Monument in southern Colorado. So, when it was time to go hike out into the middle of the desert, we hiked out into the middle of a desert, and there was nothing but sand as far as you could see in any direction. And it was physically grueling. We had to carry all of our gear and climb these sand dunes. chasing this guy who was on the run from the forces of the mythos, and it was freezing cold, and it was one of the most physically challenging things I had ever done and still have ever done. And I've ridden a bike from Chicago to Milwaukee, so it was very hard, but it was as good as actually being in Egypt in 1923, because it was complete sensory surrounded by the imaginary experience, and it was amazing.
That sounds amazing. You must have lifetime memories from that.
Oh yeah.
So you were talking about the physical location. I read on your website you just recently moved into a new actual physical place. Where is it located at?
Yeah, we've actually been there a couple of years now. We probably should update our website, but we're in Glendale, California, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, next to Burbank. We've been there, just turned 4 years now that we've been at this location.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit north of the Los Angeles Zoo. For people who know Los Angeles at all, that gives you an idea of where it is. But one of the nice things about our current location is, in addition to having, the sort of industrial workspace and packaging and shipping departments that we've had in the past, we have a nice retail storefront. This place used to be an antique store, so it's got nice glass windows, and we have a nice library that's accessible to the public, and we get foot traffic of people just wandering in going, hey, what is this place?
So do you do a lot of your prop production and stuff in-house, do it there, or or do you have that manufactured and shipped to you for the different prop sets, like the mass prop set and the stuff like that, since you said you were kind of industrialized in the back part of the house?
It's a mix of both. Of that, the majority of the stuff we make ourselves in-house, but we do work with some other specialist vendors and artisans. We work with a guy named Alan Carey in Australia who makes some stuff that are part of the Masks Super Deluxe prop set. We work with several different printers, most of them in Southern California, but the people who do our newspapers are up in Oregon.
We have a wide set of vendors who make things for us, but for whether it's for our dark adventure shows or our gaming prop sets, they supply us with different ingredients that we may put together a package with something from printer A, something from printer B, something from manufacturer C, and something that we whip up in-house ourselves, and all that gets bundled together by us at the HPLHS.
Nice, very nice. So you mentioned Dart. How long have you been doing Dart, like the dark action radio theater?
The first episode we did was at the Mountains of Madness, which we put together in the winter, I think, of 2007. No?
Yeah,
yes, I think that's when it was. So
yeah.
And right now we're working on our 25th and 26th shows.
Yes.
are currently in pre-production, and we'll be recording probably in the next few weeks, actually, within a month.
Yeah.
So
at least number 25. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Dark Adventure Radio Theater, we did it kind of on a lark. We were coming on the heels of having made the motion picture Call of Cthulhu, and we're sort of thinking about, in a virtual world where, instead of being an obscure New England writer, if Lovecraft himself had been popular and successful, and we made Call of Cthulhu, imagining what if a Hollywood motion picture company had adapted Call of Cthulhu for the screen, and then a sort of a follow-up corollary was, what if some of the stories were adapted for the media of early radio dramas? And so we decided to make the Mountains of Madness and see whether people took to it or not. And it turns out, it's the most popular thing we do, and people seem to really enjoy those types of stories told in that particular manner.
We discovered, when we were making the movie of Call of Cthulhu in the style of a 1920 silent film, we discovered how well suited to the material it is to a silent film. Really engages the audience's imagination because there's no dialogue. So the audience really has to imagine, really has to participate in creating the experience in their own mind. And radio audio drama kind of works the same way, where you have to supply all the pictures for yourself. just based on what you're hearing. So after the fun of doing Call of Cthulhu as a movie, it seemed like, what if we've done a Lovecraft story where we give you the picture but not the sound. What happens if we give you the sound but not the picture? And
nice.
And it turned out to again, kind of like a silent movie, an audio drama is really well suited to Lovecraftian material because it lets the audience imagine what's happening so much more vividly than if it was a, you know, big budget Hollywood CGI blockbuster extravaganza where there's nothing left to the audience's imagination.
Nice. So, what is your creation process when you, let's say you find a story or something that you want to do in that medium? What is your creation process? How do you get it all set up? How do you find your talent? Do you do open casting calls? What is your process behind setting up for one of these radio productions?
So generally speaking, the first step is just to kind of zero in on a project. Hey, you know, there's only so many left at this point too. So we've done a few original ones. We've adapted some of the Chaosium campaigns, but we just got to pick something. So, you know, we recently, our next title is going to be Lovecraft's The Horror in the Museum. So having looked at that, we were like, oh, this has a lot of the makings for a good dark adventure show. Then what we do is we write a treatment, which is basically a sort of a dramatic outline or skeletonized version of a script to say, okay, well, what if this happens and then this happens and then this happens and this happens? It's basically just breaks down the major beats of the story. It's usually a 10, 12-page document that does that. And we'll go back and forth between us a couple times on that to say, well, what if instead of, you know, character A doing such and such, what if he's this kind of guy and does this sort of thing? And what if then in scene 11, we have a twist here where something happens that's different in the story? So we work out sort of what are the events that'll happen in the story. And once we agree on that, then we'll go through and write the dialogue. And we already know, okay, scene 4 is between this character and that character in which they, you know, argue about such and such, and the result is this. So it's much easier to write a scene when you know who's in it and what it's about and how it ends. So then we'll get a draft version of the script. We'll pass those back and forth a few times to just, you know, bring in new ideas and new revisions to get those in place. And then once a script is finally, you know, I don't want to do anything else to it, and Andrew doesn't want to do anything else to it, then we'll, before COVID times, we would bring then together a cast of actors for a live table read. Lately, we've done the last couple of them over Zoom. You know, we're very fortunate to be theater guys in Los Angeles, so putting together a cast of professional actors is, you know, usually sending out a handful of emails. We can get, you know, a pretty terrific company of people who have, you know, extensive professional experience and are good choices, casting choices for the show. Then we'll do the table read, and that also lets us hear the material out loud, done by actors, and it's usually a very informative process. And every now and then we'll rewrite a scene or change something, you know, when we discover that in the acting of it, something didn't play quite the way we intended. But usually that's kind of fine-tuning level things. We don't usually have to make a lot of serious changes at that point in the game. But once we've done the table read, once we've made changes based on that, then we'll book studio time. We can record in-house at the HPLHS, so sometimes we record some stuff there. Sort of depends. If we have big scenes where, you know, a scene with 8 characters or something, it'll be easier to go do it in a big professional studio. If we have something that, say it's a scene between Andrew and I, it's much easier for us to just
knock it
grab
out,
a microphone and sit down at our place and knock it out there. So we'll do the recordings then, get all that material done. We'll then take all those pieces, put them together in an edit, just where it's the good takes and in the right sequence. And then we can send that out to our composers so they have an idea of how the scenes play and what they feel like, so they can start working on the music. And while the composers are working on the music, we work on the sound design and on the props. And that's one of the things with Dark Adventure is that each of the shows comes with at least 4 props from the show, newspaper clippings, photos, stuff like that. Andrew, you want to talk about that a little bit? Or?
Sure. Because we got our start, through gaming, props have always been an integral part of our form of storytelling. So even though we're doing a radio show, it still has props. It comes with feelies that take you deeper into the world of the story and sort of let you cross over into the imaginary world in which the story takes place. So when we started doing Dark Adventure, they were all packaged in jewel cases with CDs. So we had to choose props that could be folded up and jammed inside a jewel case. We've switched over to a different packaging format now. So we have, when we did Masks of Nyarlathotep a few episodes back, it just had more props and bigger props than could possibly fit in a jewel case. And so we took that as an opportunity to expand the format in general. So now we're doing bigger things that could never fit into a jewel case. So now we do, instead of just a clipping from a newspaper, it's an entire half a page from a newspaper and bigger maps that fold out into large sizes and stuff like that. And part of the development process, before we even record, is we choose what are the prop items that would help, augment the experience and help tell the story. Because we try to provide extra story material in the props so that, it just enriches the story experience for the audience. So, while Sean is working on the sound effects and the composer's working on the music, I'm usually working on prop designs. And so we can try to all reach the finish line more or less simultaneously.
Amazing. So you just mentioned the Mask of Nyarlathotep Dart production. Did y'all actually do a playthrough prior, with a group to since it is based on a campaign? Did you actually do a playthrough, or did you just sit down, read the book, and then kind of write in your characters and figure out what the best script would be based on that?
We had played it way back in the day. We didn't do a new playthrough as part of the development process for the radio show, but we had played it, decades earlier and remembered at least some of that experience.
And I think really very little of that, though, informed the new script for Masks. It was one of the, I think we realized we would be better served to just try and tell the story of Masks as dramatically as we could, rather than to try and historically recreate, how a playthrough went a very long time ago. So It was, really looking at what would be a fun set of protagonists to throw into this adventure, and then given that set of protagonists, what sorts of decisions might those characters make, and then in a playing of the game, what might be the repercussions of those decisions, in the midst of this particular story.
The version that we played, many, many years ago was, the first edition under a different set of rules than the, current 7th edition re-release. So the game we played was in many ways fundamentally different from the one Chaosium is, currently offering. And we also, we didn't want to spoil the playing experience for people who listen to the radio version. It's different enough from, whenever you get specific, a Call of Cthulhu adventure leaves a lot of room for maneuvering.
Yes.
But when you add, your specific protagonists, then they're going to make specific decisions that are not necessarily what players are going to do when they play the game. We wanted to make sure that people could listen to our show and still be surprised by what happens when they actually play the game for themselves.
Have y'all thought about going back and say doing like with the new release of the 7th edition, you have the new prologue chapter. Have y'all thought about possibly going back and doing just a special feature prologue Dart adventure?
There are parts of the new version of Masks that we actually deliberately omitted. And the whole Peru chapter was something that we omitted, and I don't know if you've heard our masks, but our playing of Egypt is pretty substantially different than I think most players' experience of the Egypt chapter would be. We decided, we already had a 7-hour show, and we just didn't really feel any need to make masks any longer for its own sake.
Right.
By adding in a whole Peru segment. And instead, we sort of wove Jackson Elias's backstory into our protagonist Hazel's backstory pretty tightly, so that right off the bat, when it begins in New York, there's an emotional connection there that already exists. We could write in for our protagonists versus something that people would play in to get that bond with Jackson Elias by playing the Peru chapter. And with the Egypt chapter, we had already made a radio play of the Imprisoned with the Pharaohs, the Lovecraft story, and the climax of that story is very, very, very similar to the climax of the Egypt chapter. And so we didn't want to redo a subterranean and Egyptian hoo-ha that we had already done. We felt like, we would be repeating ourselves for us to redo that. So we kind of shifted the focus of how things unfold in Egypt to serve our needs, even though it's likely to be divergent from what somebody playing the campaign would go through.
Makes sense. So what is your all-time personal favorite Dart productions that you've done for each one of you, and like what's your most memorable moments in Dart?
That every time anybody asks me that question, the answer usually changes. At the moment, I've been thinking recently. I had somebody mention Dagon War of Worlds to me, and I was remembering, Dagon War of Worlds is a very fun episode because it combines several different stories and other classic radio moments that actually happened. And it's just a very wacky, fun sort of thrill ride sort of episode. If you ask me tomorrow, you might get a different answer. But today my answer is Dagon War of Worlds.
How about you, Sean?
I think I would go with The Color Out of Space, which I've always thought our show of The Color Out of Space came together really nicely. It's really, I think, very well acted, and it's, where a show like Andrew said, Dagon War of Worlds is a big action-packed, pulpy kind of thing, like the original story Color Out of Space. Our Color Out of Space is very muted and understated, and I think truer to the bulk of Lovecraft's literature in terms of tone. And then I recently had cause to see the new Color Out of Space motion picture, and I think the way in which the radio drama handles the destruction of the gardeners is much more poignant and affecting than the way the motion picture deals with. You could ostensibly say it's the exact same set of events, but
right.
But I personally, for my taste, I like the way that unfolds, and I think it's much more tragic in the radio drama than it is in the motion picture.
So one of the things that I saw that you guys do, which is really, really interesting, is the Decoder Club. Can you tell me a little bit about how that works and how you weave in the clues and things like that into your various products?
Sure. We did. The Decoder Club was also a thing that got its launch with Masks of Nyarlathotep. If people may not be aware that, like Little Orphan Annie, there were a lot of the classic radio shows that had a Decoder Club sort of element, and decoder badges were a fun premium that you could get. And especially during World War II, there were very patriotic decodable messages that you would get. We thought it'd be fun. That's one of our, guiding principles. We do things we do because we think they would be fun, and we thought it would be fun to add a Decoder Club element to Dark Adventure Radio Theater. Since Masks of Nyarlathotep was a relatively recent episode. We had done about 18 or 20 episodes before that, so we sort of had to retcon clues into all the pre-existing episodes, but it turned out to actually not be that hard. So we now have, we've identified the way it works is that if you listen to the show or look at the props that come with the show, you'll find a variety of clues. The decoder badge is one of those classic cipher wheels that correlates one letter to one number, and you have a little wheel you can turn so you can change what the settings on the decoder badge are. So you'll hear, if you listen carefully to the dialogue, you can find somebody says something like, you two go over there, and you two is a Decoder Club clue. You correlate the U to the 2 on your decoder wheel, and then if you go to a special page on our website, you find the coded messages. And now that you found the clue in the show, you can go find the message on the website, and then you can decode the message. And so now that we've instituted the Decoder Club, now we're deliberately putting coded clues into episodes and props.
Please tell me that you're doing one that just says "drink more Ovaltine," because that would just be that would just be amazing.
Something like that.
Sorry,
a lot of the coded messages are little sort of behind-the-scenes glimpses or fun facts. But every once in a while, yeah, we do a drink more Ovaltine type of coded message. Yeah.
Those are awesome. So you have Dart, and then you have your audiobook sections as well. You've done, I believe, 74 stories, and pretty much the complete works of H.P. Lovecraft, correct?
Yeah, what we did is, we took the sort of the classic canon as edited by S.T. Joshi of Lovecraft stories and recorded those. And 74 sounds right. It's about 55 hours of material. How we look at it is by the hour. And we did, just professional style audiobook recordings of those. And then we took all of Lovecraft's collaboration tales that he did with, Zelia Bishop and Hazel Head and the rest of the many people.
Yep.
Almost all of them. That's true. There were legal issues that surround one of Lovecraft's collaborators, so we steered clear of that. And we released an audiobook of that. And then we're currently in production on another audiobook, which takes Lovecraft's favorite weird tales, most of which he enumerated in his long essay, Supernatural Horror and Literature, and are recording those as audiobooks. So people can hear the actual sort of source and inspirational stories that Lovecraft himself enjoyed. And hearing them all together, I think actually does a great job of sort of putting together the context of inspiration that Lovecraft drew upon when writing his own stories. So that should be, with any luck, that'll be ready for release late this year. So
very nice.
Or at least the first part of it. It's a lot of material.
Yeah, it is a lot of material because some of the stories that he liked were novels. And so if it's a novel that he cited, we're recording the entire novel. Which some of them have a lot of words in them.
just a few.
Yeah.
So
19th century, they love their words.
Didn't they though? Didn't they?
Unpronounceable words that no one says anymore.
So talking about Lovecraft, one of the things that is it's always a very sensitive subject. How do you guys deal with the separating the art from the artist and some of the negative attributes of H.P. Lovecraft?
Yeah, it's an important, I think, if you're going to be a fan of Lovecraft, I think you should be a well-informed fan, and it is something that everybody has to grapple with in their own ways. I think, for Andrew and I look at it from kind of through the lens of, there is the artist and there is the art, and one can love the art and lament the artist. One does not have to agree with Wagner to like to listen to the music. One does not have to share, Thomas Jefferson's feelings about owning slaves, and in order to appreciate, the documents that founded the United States of America. I mean, there's plenty of room for most people, to have some differentiation between the two. That said, some people don't want anything to do with Lovecraft because he held racist views, and we're certainly not trying to force it on anybody, and anybody who doesn't want to read it ought not read it, and we're okay with that, and absolutely respect anybody's opinion to not read anything they find objectionable. But in art, history, literature, architecture, music, in all fields, there are a lot of people who have made profoundly meaningful contributions, who have also held, personal views that are simply odious and have no place in the modern world. And we're comfortable in saying, again, accepting the art and not subscribing to the artist's personal beliefs. So that's, I think, a crash course in where we stand.
And we don't apologize for Lovecraft. We're not trying to fix him. We're not trying to wave away the issues. They are real. They are there. We frequently confront them, especially in our podcast where we read his letters out loud and talk about him on a more personal level. We're not here to excuse his thoughts or tell people they should get over it. That's not where we come from at all. There are real issues, and everybody has to deal with them in their own way, and we grapple with them all the time because we don't agree with what Lovecraft thought about a lot of things, but that doesn't mean we don't enjoy the fictional world that he created, and we very much enjoy playing around in it.
Absolutely. So moving back to the some of your merchandise that you have, let's go ahead and talk about the prop sets. Take for instance the Mascanile prop set. How did y'all put that together? Did you work hand in hand with Chaosium? What was the? I mean, that's such an amazing piece, and I personally have it sitting on my wall directly in front of me. I just want to know how y'all worked it out and put that together, because it's such an amazing piece.
Yeah, it kind of, the project sort of began at, I can't even remember now, it's probably Necronomicon in 2017. I was sitting down with Mike Mason, and as the new management of Chaosium had come on board, we hadn't really worked with them yet, and was just talking about things that they had coming, and he was very excited for a new release of masks. And I suggested, well, maybe a really great, super realistic prop set for that might be a worthwhile thing to have out there. And completely to their credit, the folks at Chaosium have been nothing but enthusiastic about what we do, and I think they realize that having super high quality props enhances the gaming experience, and they realize there are absolute limitations of what they can do because they publish books. They don't make packs of matches and bronze Egyptian scepters. That's not their business. They publish books, and the things they're going to put out need to be in a book. And so I think there's a sense that being able to make a deeper, richer, more immersive prop set for the games, is just us putting frosting on their cake. So they've been very eager to have us do that, and we're even now in discussions about possible prop sets for a whole variety of other things in the Call of Cthulhu ecosystem. But you want to talk about the process a little, Andrew?
Well, could you hold on one second, Andrew? Oh. Could you possibly give us a hint on some of those potentially upcoming prop sets?
Well, yeah, because they're all, since potential is the operative word. Horror on the Orient Express is something that there's interest in. Beyond the Mountains of Madness is something that there's interest in. Children of Fear is something that there's interest in. And then there are other not announced things that there's an interest in prop sets for as well. But at least the things that either are currently in print or there are a couple of those, like Horror in the Orient Express and Beyond the Mountains of Madness, which are currently in print in a previous edition. I think both of those are either fifth or sixth.
Yep.
Which Chaosium is planning to do a re-release of them for a seventh edition, and kind of rewrite and update the scenarios a little bit. And there's some interest there. So, and that's not to say that we will be making prop sets of those, but we're talking with them about it, and we're looking at, because one of the questions ends up being, how much value, how much benefit can the types of things we do bring to the particular props that are in this set. In masks, I think there's a lot of value, and I think that's why people have so embraced our prop set. Is there's a lot of props in that game, and it certainly enriches all kinds of experiences as you're dealing with things that have a level of verisimilitude that we do that vastly exceeds what Chaosium is able to do.
Excellent. Back to Andrew for the process.
I'd say it sort of started when we did the Dark Adventure Radio Theater adaptation of Brotherhood of the Beast. And since we've always done prop documents with our Dark Adventure shows, when it came time to do Brotherhood of the Beast, at the time, that was the biggest episode we had ever done. It was a 3 CD, choose your own ending kind of thing. And because it was based on another Chaosium game, but before the current management team at Chaosium had sort of taken over, we did a super deluxe version of that show that had a lot of extra prop things. And that was sort of I'd say the thin end of the wedge, except it wasn't very thin. It was very blunt wedge at both ends. But it's what sort of opened the door to the idea of a massive set of props that would go with the show. We just recognized that there was going to be a huge amount of overlap between the props that we wanted to do for the Dark Adventure show and the props that people would need if they wanted to play the game. So, we were already doing the work of making the props for the sake of the radio version. So adding on some extra stuff, including, there's a difference between props and handouts, at least in our universe. Props are things that the characters in the story themselves interact with, and handouts are things that only the players in the real world have to deal with. So in order to do a prop set for players, we had to not only do the props, but also all the handouts. So, we were already doing the props for the radio version. So just going that extra mile or two to add all the handouts and props that were part of the game, but didn't actually have anything to do with our radio dramatization of the story it just seemed like a good fit. So, we plunged ahead and when we are doing prop stuff, we, as best we can, we base our documents on examples of genuine vintage documents. I spend a lot of time going through eBay. We have a member of the society named David Cerconi who lives in Washington, D.C. and can, at least before COVID, he was able to go to the Library of Congress and research vintage documents, old newspapers, stuff like that. So we do everything we can to make them as realistic as they can possibly be. We create them. It's all, they're all done. I grew up in a publishing family. So vintage typography and those sort of classic graphic design techniques are something I personally really enjoy spending time doing. So to me, it's a lot of fun to make the props, and I get into all the fiddly typographical details and recreating, what the paper itself would be like. The paper itself tells part of the story of the document and the history of the document itself. So it's easy to go down some very deep rabbit holes when you're making these props, but they're a lot of fun and they really help enrich the experience.
Y'all do an amazing job. Hang on one second.
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. So in today's world, we're moving, especially with like COVID and stuff. a lot of people have moved on to virtual tabletops and virtual role playing, be it Fantasy Grounds or Roll20 or just over Discord. Is there ever any thoughts of moving, or not moving to, but adding an additional digital prop set?
We have top men looking into that.
Yeah,
You know, one of the things that set us apart, you know, in our live gaming and the many things we do is we really like verisimilitude. We like things to be realistic. We believe a good prop should be done to an evidentiary level of detail. It should be enough to deceive members of a court. And so we don't like putting out anything that's fakey. And of course, you know,
By
a
nature.
virtual document is fundamentally not the same as a real physical tangible one. So, we're looking at a couple. Sorry, go ahead.
Sean, I was just gonna a perfect example of the difference is a newspaper clipping. If you have a newspaper clipping that's printed with real ink on actual newsprint, and there's something on the other side, you know, it just is so much more. You can smell the ink. It just takes you into the story in a way that no PDF or photo or JPEG could ever recreate.
Yeah, the textures, the feels, the smells even of the stuff it's just it's second to none. You can't really replace that or repeat that in a digital medium.
Yeah. So, but we get the desire. You know, we're not such Luddites that we don't understand why people wish there were digital versions of our props. So there are a couple technologies we're looking at and kind of trying to weigh the compromise whether ultimately, you know, this is a direction we want to go or not. But it's certainly under consideration. We had done a couple humorous audio projects. We had done a CD of a parody version of a Lovecraftian Broadway musical called A Shuggoth on the Roof, and that was well received. And then we had done some parody Christmas carols called A Very Scary Solstice. And so we wanted to do something in a more serious vein and something that was a direct adaptation of Lovecraft. So we thought, after thinking of a couple different movies, that adapting The Call of Cthulhu as a straight up silent film and not trying to modernize it and put in car chases and shower scenes, but keep it very true to the period in which it was written, would be a worthwhile endeavor.
One of the inspirations for that project, we've been going up to the HP Lovecraft Film Festival in Portland, Oregon every year that they've had it for a very long time now. And many years ago, they screened a short film called The Old Man and the Goblins, which was a stop motion animated film done in the style of the German expressionist puppet films of like the late 19-teens, early 1920s. And it was made by Seamus Walsh and Mark Caballero. It's very short, but it's just very atmospheric and brilliantly done. And it was sort of seeing that movie that made us think, what if we were to try to adapt a Lovecraft movie in the way they would have done it when it was written, a silent black and white mid-1920s film. So that was one of the inspirations for the project. And you know, Sean took it on himself to, you know, do what they call the scenario, adapt the story for the screen. And we dove in without really knowing how hard it would be or how long it would take. We didn't have a budget planned out in advance. We just and we didn't have enough space to, you know, build all the sets at the same time. We would have to build a set and shoot on it and tear it down and build another set and shoot on it and tear it down. And we had a very talented friend named David Robertson, who was a brilliant a proper trained cinematographer who is a master at, he can light black and white cinematography and do miracles with just one light bulb. And he was instrumental in making it look as good as it looks. And, you know, it was shot on standard definition videotape. It was not a technologically, we were trying to make it the way we imagined it would have been made. So we tried to use, you know, forced perspective miniatures and half silvered mirrors, and use the sorts of in the camera tricks that would have been used in the 1920s. You know, we couldn't put real boats on any real water, so the boats are miniatures and the water is fabric with glitter on it. And it's, you know, we came to the conclusion we're never going to trick anyone into thinking this is a real boat. We just want it to be the coolest looking miniature boat we can make. So that was sort of the guiding principle behind Call of Cthulhu. And one of the things we learned was, well, let's never make a movie that way again.
So you mentioned a budget on that. What does something like that actually cost to produce and make? I mean, that seems like it's astronomical. Or like, you know, my son he's a theater kid, and he went to a theater magnet school, and they have a film division, and so they do all these little movies and stuff like that. And I showed him Call of Cthulhu, and it just amazes me that y'all did that with just like your personal budget and your personal kind of thing. That's just incredible.
Yeah, the Call of Cthulhu was about $60,000 or so that we spent on it ultimately. So
it's amazing. That's awesome. So you guys also
and it turned out to be a good investment.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the Call of Cthulhu made its money back in 5 weeks.
And it's what enabled Sean and me to turn, you know, Lovecraft stuff into our own full-time jobs. It was before the Call of Cthulhu, we, you know, Lovecraftian stuff was our hobby, but both of us had, you know, day jobs doing other things. But it was because of the unexpected reception that movie got, that's what enabled us to become full-time Lovecraft guys.
And being full-time Lovecraft guys is all we've done since. And
yeah.
So. Do y'all have any other future movies that y'all are looking at doing or putting together?
We got a bunch of stuff. You know, one of the you kind of put your finger on it, that there are limits to what one wants to fund with one's own checkbook and you know, money you find under the couch. So most of the stuff we're talking about at this point is more ambitious and more difficult and
more expensive at that point.
Would want to involve, you know, the types of resources that we just simply don't have. So now we're in a situation where most of our film stuff is involving potential other producers and other investors, and, you know, so we can continue to raise the scope and scale of what we're doing, but no longer just working out of, you know, our own personal resources as what goes into the films.
Right. And so you also have a podcast that you guys do. Can you tell me a little bit about the podcast, when it comes out, what kind of topics you generally cover, where viewers could find that podcast?
Sure. One of the things about Lovecraft, in addition to writing his stories and writing a little bit of poetry and writing a bunch of essays, is he was the most voluminous correspondent in American history, and frankly, one of the world's most voluminous correspondents. The man wrote a lot of letters. And his letters become a really interesting autobiography and view into the life and times of the 1920s and 30s, and through the lens of this person who's an artist who a lot of us find really interesting. So, the genre of weird fiction when it was being invented. I mean, Lovecraft got in on the ground floor of pop culture. Yeah. So reading his letters is a very interesting view into
the early days of the genre that we all enjoy, and Lovecraft was a correspondent of Robert E. Howard's and Clark Ashton Smith's and some of the other major figures in weird fiction of the day. So his letters are fascinating, and there's a lot of them.
Yeah, and his letters, he didn't tend to write a one page, hey, how's it going? Slightly rainy here in Providence today. Some of his letters run 60, 70 pages, and he talks on every subject under the sun. And fortunately, as a result, a lot of his correspondents kept his letters. And so, while he may have written as many as 100,000, still maybe 10,000 are still extant. So there's a lot of letters to choose from. So on our podcast, Voluminous, we used to record it on a weekly basis and decided that was, after doing that for a year, that was killing us. So we've changed it to a monthly basis this year.
It just didn't leave enough time for us to work on all the other stuff we're trying to do. So
yeah. So for every episode, we take one of his letters, one of us will record it, and then the two of us will have a conversation about the letters and essentially what makes it interesting, who were the people referred to, what's the history referred to, what can be gleaned from some of the less easily accessible, information in the letter. And then we end up having a good chat about, all kinds of different topics and getting to know Lovecraft more deeply through reading his mail.
So I noticed on your site that you had actually just successfully acquired some letters recently.
Yeah.
Are you able to, when you come to your location, is there actually a museum section where you can actually see these kind of things, or where do they go?
Yeah, so we have one of the better Lovecraft libraries in the country, and anybody who comes to the HP Lovecraft Historical Society is welcome to browse through our reference library and Museum of Weird Stuff, and we have a lot of weird stuff too. So it's there and available for the public. In our personal collection, we have one of Lovecraft's letters and one of his postcards that we have there at our facility. And then we were just recently involved in the acquisition of a large quantity of Lovecraft's letters to another writer named Frank Belknap Long. But that acquisition was not done to benefit us. That was done to benefit Brown University. So this collection of letters from Lovecraft to Frank Belknap Long were all donated to the John Hay Library at Brown University.
Very nice.
That library, it's in Providence, Rhode Island, Lovecraft's hometown, and it is, this sort of official repository of Lovecraft's papers and correspondence, manuscripts. They have a vast collection of Lovecraft's materials, a lot of which they have scanned in super high resolution, and you can go look at all of it through what's called the Brown Digital Repository. Eventually, these letters that were just recently acquired to Frank Belknap Long, they'll all be scanned and added to the Brown Digital Repository, and anybody who wants to and has a good internet connection can go look at all of them eventually. It might not all get done this year, but I know they're going to prioritize scanning all those letters, and eventually you'll be able to look at all of them along with thousands of pages of other stuff, including the original manuscripts and corrected typescripts of some of his stories and letters written to him by other people and letters that he wrote. And it's a very rich collection, and a lot of it is digitally available through the internet.
That's amazing. Just out of curiosity, because how much did it cost to actually acquire the letters? I mean, it must have been how does one go about doing something like that? I mean, did you have to how did you find them? How much did they cost in the end? How did you negotiate the prices for those?
They were in the hands of some private collector. We don't even know technically who owned them, but they were being offered. There's a rare book dealer named L.W. Curry who handles a lot of genre fiction stuff. And, he had posted, this collection of letters was posted for sale on L.W. Curry's website for a long time. And the price was, I forget what the original price was, Sean, but wasn't it
over $300,000?
I'm sorry, what was that?
It was over $300,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was it was just out of reach for all but, you know, the most extravagant millionaire Lovecraft fan. But Curry was willing to give Brown an institutional discount because Curry wants, you know, Brown couldn't afford the asking price.
Right.
So Curry was willing to give them a discount, but even the discounted price was more than Brown could afford itself. So in conjunction with S.T. Joshi, you know, the preeminent scholar of Lovecraft, and Derek Hussey, who runs Hippocampus Press, which publishes lots of collections of Lovecraft's letters. The HPLHS, ST, and Derek Hussey sort of combined forces to raise the money that equaled the sort of institutional discounted price, and that's how we put together all the funds needed to get them into the hands finally of Brown University.
It's amazing. That's truly amazing. Okay, so back to you guys as a whole and your organization. Can you tell me about your memberships and how to get involved and help you guys out?
Well, we're the largest organization of Lovecraft fans in the world. The society, I think, at the moment we have members in like 45 countries or something. It is a global thing, and it's great to see, you know, Lovecraft fans in, you know, northern Finland and South Tasmania and, you know, everywhere in between. It's pretty neat. So we, in addition to being a society in name, we have actual memberships that people can buy and get their own membership card and membership certificate. We have a special members only section of our website, and we do different events. You know, we have sales that are just for our members only. We have events like a holiday gift exchange among our members and things like that. So we have different participatory opportunities for people who are actual members of the society.
We have this increasingly elaborate bonus stamp program where members can earn bonus stamps based on a variety of different things. Some of them are, you know, sort of loyalty rewards for purchases through our online store, but some of them, like we have the pilgrimage stamp that any member who actually goes to Providence, Rhode Island and takes photos of themselves standing in front of certain specific Lovecraft-oriented sites can get the pilgrimage bonus stamp. And there's all kinds of different bonus stamps. And when a lot of the members enjoy collecting them, and when you get 5, you get an extra bonus stamp just for having 5 more bonus stamps, and that gets you a discount in our online store. And so there's a members only Facebook group, and we do all we can to, you know, provide unique benefits to the membership and give them an opportunity to meet each other and share their own creations and just have fun discussing Lovecraft and stuff like that.
Nice. Well, guys, I really want to just say thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else that you would like to say to our watchers or viewers?
You know, our motto through lo these many years we've been doing this is Ludo fore putavimus, which means we thought it would be fun. That's why we do it. We have most days a lot of fun doing what we do, and you know, we'd like to share that fun with others. So if that sounds like your bag, come on over and check out the HPLHS. And if it doesn't sound like your bag, well, carry on as usual then.
Our website, you know, has there's lots of stuff on our website. There's a bunch of free downloadable props and fonts and music samples and video clips. And so swing on by hplhs.org and check it out. If you want to get even more stuff, you can officially join through our online store, and we'll be happy to have you, and you can meet the whole rest of the gang.
I just want to say thank you guys so much. And if you're watching this till the end, I wanted to let you know that they actually gave us a 15% off discount code. If you go to their site and you want to purchase something, just enter in Arkham Audio 21, and you'll get a 15% off. So definitely check it out. And again, thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate your time, and see you next time on Arkham Audio.
All right. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.